The mother teleported to the monster's side and obliterated it with a single blow. Immediately after, she took her daughter to find a wizard. The mother asked him to temporarily seal her daughter's powers and memories. She didn't want her daughter to step into that dangerous world too soon. The girl, named Clara, was a natural-born psychic, but because her powers were too strong, even frogs would turn into terrifying monsters under her influence. Although the mother Jocelyn also had powerful abilities, she felt mentally and physically exhausted by the constant attacks, so she decided to take this step. 10 years later, the once little Clara had grown into a young woman. Today was her 18th birthday celebration. Jocelyn had intended to tell her daughter those things before they could exchange a few words. Clara's phone suddenly rang. It was a friend inviting Clara out to celebrate her birthday. Jocelyn could only wait until her daughter returned to talk. Clara arrived at the meeting place with her friends. She was bumped into by a man. The man seemed to not see her at all. Clara demanded an apology from him. The man looked very surprised. He kept asking Clara why she could see him. Seeing the man's reaction, Clara thought he was just crazy, but in reality, the man was named Jess. He was a professional shadow hunter. The members of their organization would draw various runes on their bodies, which held great power. This naturally included invisibility runes. Ordinary people couldn't see them at all. However, Clara was unaffected by this power. Jess speculated that she might have spiritual sight, but before he could ask more, he was called away by his companions. Jess was out this time on a mission. According to intelligence reports, there was a demon nearby, so Jess, along with two teammates Eric and Isa, came to investigate. After searching, they had identified the demon. Although this guy was cautious in his actions, after touching a human, he would take on their appearance, but he still couldn't escape their keen eyes. The three followed the demon to this place. Jess and his companions entered the bar to search for the demon. However, he didn't know that this bar was also Clara's target. At the same time, the demon was unaware that he had already been exposed. Confidently, he met with two men in black. He handed over a vial of mysterious blood to them. Then he prepared to leave. But unexpectedly, the bar owner turned out to be a wizard. The owner immediately controlled one of the men in black.
Circle members aren't welcome in my club.
Two men in black, known as the Circle, knew they were no match for the owner. They decided to leave immediately. However, a sudden change occurred at this moment, because there were simply too many people in the bar. Isa came up with a plan. She took the initiative to go on stage and perform a sultry dance. With her stunning looks and hot figure, the demon was instantly captivated. Ordinary people couldn't see Isa at all. Thus, the demon's actions became particularly conspicuous. In this way, Jess locked onto the target. He prepared to launch a sneak attack from behind, but the demon noticed him and fought back fiercely. The two members of the circle noticed the situation here and hurried their pace to leave. At this time, the scene was in complete chaos. Fortunately, Jess and his team were professionally trained. The demon was quickly overwhelmed and unable to fight back. Just then, Clara rushed out. She thought Jess was bullying the woman disguised as a demon, so she stepped in to help. Because of her obstruction, the demon had a chance to catch its breath and immediately bit Jess. Fortunately, Jess reacted in time and avoided the bite. Clara realized she had made a mistake. She hurriedly fled the scene. However, when she got into her car, she happened to be spotted by the two circle members. They were able to sense something unusual about her. Clara returned home and told her mother what had happened. Jocelyn looked helpless upon hearing this. She explained everything. It was then that Clara realized she had powers. Now, the sealed power was almost entirely depleted. Then, Jocelyn gifted Clara a wand as a coming-of-age present. The butler suddenly burst in, saying that the circle members were after them. Jocelyn's expression instantly became serious. She gave Clara a necklace and urged her to protect it at all costs. As for the specifics, Officer Luke at the police station would inform her. After that, the butler cast a spell, turning a door into a portal. Clara was sent through the portal. When she came to her senses again, she found herself at the police station. However, the sheriff Luke she was looking for was currently in a bit of trouble. A few members of the circle were surrounding him, demanding to know the whereabouts of the Holy Grail.
I don't care about either of them. They mean nothing to me. Kill them both if you like.
Luke's response left Clara utterly disappointed. She thought he had betrayed her and was no longer reliable, so Clara quietly escaped from the police station. She planned to go home and discuss things with her mother. However, what she didn't know was that Luke had already noticed Clara's presence. His words were meant to divert the circle members and prevent Clara from being entangled by them. Of course, Clara would have no idea that after she left, a group of circle members stormed into her home. Jocelyn and the butler fought hard to resist, but after all, 2 fists couldn't compete with 4 hands. The butler was caught off guard and thrown out of the window. Seeing that the butler had been killed, Jocelyn knew she couldn't hold out much longer. She burned Clara's room, ensuring that no clues about her daughter remained. Then Jocelyn fought desperately against the circle members. After killing a few enemies, she refused to be captured by them. Jocelyn drank poison and took her own life. What Jocelyn didn't expect was that Clara would return home. The house was in disarray. There was no sign of her mother. But the next moment, the butler suddenly appeared. Clara had no idea that both the butler and her mother had been killed. She only vaguely felt that something was wrong about the butler. He kept asking about the Holy Grail. Clara had no idea what that was. The first time she heard of it was from Luke. The butler failed to obtain any information about the Grail and grew increasingly agitated. He revealed his true form and prepared to devour her. Fortunately, Clara reacted in time and stabbed the monster with her wand, but the creature transformed into an even more terrifying form and charged at Clara. At this critical moment, Jess appeared just in time and killed the monster. Clara fainted from exhaustion. When Clara woke up again, she found herself in the Shadow Hunter's base, and she discovered that there was an unfamiliar rune on her neck. According to Jess, this rune was called a rune totem. It granted the bearer extraordinary power and could heal most wounds. Jess also introduced her to the Shadow Hunters organization. The origins of this organization were very ancient. Its purpose was to protect humanity from demon harm. However, due to many years of development, other purposes had emerged. This led to the formation of many branches. The Circle was one such branch. In addition, there were other groups like the Shadow Secret Society. However, during a riot over a decade ago, the Circle betrayed the Shadow Hunters and became an opposing force. The leader was named Paladin. Hearing this name, Clara felt it was very familiar. She suddenly remembered that Luke had mentioned this name when talking to those people. But why would such an organization suddenly take action against them? What exactly was the Holy Grail? Jess suggested that perhaps one person knew. This person was named Hodge. Although he appeared to be just a boxing coach on the surface, he was actually a former member of the Circle. However, during that riot, he didn't choose to betray, so he continued to work with the Shadow Hunters. The first time Clara saw Hodge, she noticed that he had a circular rune on his neck. Hodge explained that this was the emblem of the Circle. In addition, this rune could also monitor the members. If the core secrets of the organization were mentioned, they would feel immense pain. Hodge knew the purpose of the Circle. When faced with Clara's questions, he still answered her inquiries truthfully. A shocking conspiracy was unfolding before everyone. Many years ago, Clara's mother Jocelyn was also a member of the Circle. On one occasion, she learned that Paladin planned to steal the Holy Grail. He intended to use its power to dominate the entire world. Jocelyn didn't want to see destruction and suffering, so after Paladin incited a riot and seized the Grail, Jocelyn took the opportunity to steal it and hide it away. Now that those people had found Jocelyn, they would surely try every means to extract the location of the Grail from her. Therefore, Clara and the others had to find the Grail first. Otherwise, the entire world would fall under Paladin's control. Although the situation Hodge described was very serious, Clara felt powerless, because she didn't know the whereabouts of the Grail either. Jess had a guess. Perhaps Clara had forgotten. He recalled that the Shadow Hunters had a branch that specialized in research related to memories. Maybe they could try reaching out to them. Upon hearing Jess's suggestion, the expressions of the others became strange. They also knew about this branch, but almost no one would approach them willingly. Aside from their terrifying appearance, their spells were simply too dangerous, but there was no other way. Clara decided to give it a try. Under Jess's guidance, she arrived at an organization called the Silent Brotherhood. It looked like just an ordinary mine, but after they entered, they found bones scattered everywhere, giving off a chilling and eerie aura. As they ventured deeper, Clara realized that there wasn't a single person around. Just as she was filled with confusion, the surroundings suddenly lit up with flames. Then a group of people appeared. Each of them had their facial features sewn shut with needles and thread, which looked very terrifying. However, they had no malicious intent. After hearing Clara and her companion's purpose for coming, the leader of the Silent Brotherhood agreed. He guided Clara to stand on a certain altar. Everyone began to chant a spell. Standing in the light, Clara discovered a sharp sword slowly descending above her head. According to Jess's introduction before, this sword was the source of danger for the ritual. If successful, Clara would be able to regain her memories. But if she failed, the sword would pierce her skull directly. After piercing part of her skin, the sword finally stopped descending. What followed was a flood of Clara's lost memories. It was then that Clara learned that her father was actually Paladin. The Holy Grail was hidden in a secret place, and only she and her mother could retrieve it. But exactly where it was, Jocelyn didn't specify. Perhaps she was guarding against Luke. In addition, Clara also learned that her memories had been taken by her mother's agent. Just as Clara wanted to know who had taken them, the memories abruptly stopped. The members of the Silent Brotherhood stated this was the largest portion they could restore. The rest had been taken away. They truly had no means to help further. Just as Clara was about to leave, she spotted two vampires appearing not far away. They were holding a hostage, who turned out to be Clara's friend Simon. The vampires claimed they wouldn't harm Simon for now. Their goal was the Holy Grail. As long as Clara brought the Grail to exchange, Simon would be released unharmed. Due to the non-interference treaty between races, Jess had no right to save people as a shadow hunter, and couldn't use the equipment in the arsenal until the vampire didn't harm Simon. If he went unarmed, it would be almost like sending himself to his death. Fortunately, he remembered an ancient tradition. In the past, shadow hunters would be buried with their weapons after death. So they entered the cemetery under the cover of night to obtain a batch of light swords. Now, another problem was how to locate the group of vampires. Without information from an organization, the four of them were like searching for a needle in a haystack. Just then, Issa thought of someone who would definitely know. That person was the Elven King, who was also her ex-boyfriend. Things went very smoothly. After a thorough conversation, the Elven King revealed the location of the vampire's lair. Jess and the others immediately took action. Jess took Clara to a vampire bar. It was filled with vampires feeding everywhere. After a brief observation, he targeted one of the vampires. He happened to have a modified motorcycle. Clara took the initiative to approach the vampire and strike up a conversation. The guy clouded Clara's senses and lured her onto the motorcycle to prepare to drink her blood. At this moment, Jess charged out from the corner and knocked the vampire down with a punch. He directly stole the motorcycle keys from him. He and Clara quickly left the scene. When the vampire finally reacted, the two of them had long since vanished without a trace. After providing psychic power, this modified motorcycle not only had a significant increase in speed, but could also fly. Jess and Clara were using this ability to quickly head to the vampire's lair. Meanwhile, Simon, who was waiting to be rescued, was in quite a comfortable situation. Not only was he accompanied by beautiful vampires, but they were also deeply knowledgeable about human nature. They would casually tease this young man in his 20s. If Simon truly knew nothing, he probably would have already spilled all the secrets of the shadow hunters. However, the vampire was unaware of this. She thought Simon was just strong-willed. She couldn't even sway him with her charm, so her methods became increasingly aggressive. Finally, she pulled out a rare Bloody Mary for Simon to taste. She even let him drink her blood. However, Simon took all the benefits without revealing any information. This left the female vampire quite exasperated. But these benefits wouldn't come without a cost. As a human, after drinking a vampire's blood, certain peculiar changes would inevitably occur. The most significant change would be an intense craving for blood. In addition, there would also be physical changes. However, these would manifest more slowly. Meanwhile, Jess and the others had already arrived at the vampire's lair. However, their stealth skills left much to be desired. As soon as Issa and the others opened the first door, they were discovered by patrolling vampires. Since the infiltration had failed, they had to change their plan. They would have to launch a direct attack to rescue Simon.
Coming, boys!
Under Issa's seduction, the group of vampires rushed over. Their bloodlust ignited. The result was predictable. In no time, several were killed by Issa and Eric. The remaining ones would also be dealt with sooner or later. Meanwhile, Jess and Clara seized the opportunity to go deeper inside, but they hadn't gone far when they encountered another group of vampires. Among them was a hapless vampire whose motorcycle had been stolen. Seeing each other, they were filled with animosity. That vampire knew he couldn't defeat Jess and charged straight at Clara. At this moment, she hadn't undergone any professional training and was no match for him. Fortunately, Issa and the others arrived just in time to rescue Clara. In another part of the castle, the vampire leader was also aware of the situation outside. Upon learning that a female vampire had acted on her own, he quickly went to confront her. Considering she was a vampire noble, the leader chose not to punish her for now. Instead, he ordered her to retreat first, and to hand Simon over to him. The leader would handle the rest. Thus, Clara and the others saw the vampire leader controlling Simon as he walked out. Seeing that he was using Simon as a hostage, Jess and the others were momentarily at a loss for what to do. Fortunately, the vampire leader had no intention of fighting. He simply forced them onto the rooftop, and then pushed Simon toward them.
This is about Valentine and the chaos he can bring. Come on! Chase Wayland! Remember who your friends are.
Although the vampire leader's actions were a bit extreme, everyone was safe and sound. However, they seemed unaware that Simon was staring at the veins showing on Clara. His eyes were filled with a bloodthirsty desire. Since the incident with Simon, Clara had been pondering who had taken her memories. At this moment, Hodge mentioned a sorcerer named Magnus. He was one of the most powerful sorcerers in the world today, and had been active in the supernatural world for over 300 years. He still had some friendship with Jocelyn. It was very likely that he had taken Clara's memories. Upon hearing this speculation, Clara thought it was quite possible. However, finding this guy had become the biggest challenge. To this, Hodge already had a plan. Magnus often appeared at various gatherings. Soon, there would be a festival for various races. Magnus was likely to attend. Then, Hodge took out a necklace. This was a gift Magnus had given to his first wife. He had searched for it for many years after losing it. Clara took the necklace to seek help. Magnus would likely agree to help. After that, the group went to the festival. Sure enough, they saw Magnus. Jess handed the necklace to him. Magnus' fondness for Jess and the others greatly increased. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Clara and the others asked Magnus about the memories. Magnus admitted that he had indeed taken Clara's memories, but the purpose was to ensure that this wouldn't be obtained by the Circle members. He had fed the memories to a demon of hell. If Clara wanted to retrieve them, she would have to make an exchange with the demon. It would likely come at a higher price. Just as the group was hesitating, a person at the venue was suddenly shot dead by an arrow. Upon closer inspection, it was Eric who had done it. Everyone then realized that the person was actually a member of the Circle. It turned out that during this time, Paladin had not been idle. When he initially sent people to attack Jocelyn, Jocelyn saw that the situation wasn't right, and immediately used poison to put herself in a state of feigned death, with a protective shield around her, making it impossible for Paladin to act against her. Later, after some investigation, they discovered that this potion had been concocted by Magnus. As a result, in the past few days, Paladin's subordinates had been searching for Magnus with all their might. Many sorcerers had fallen victim to the Circle as a consequence. Magnus opened a portal and invited Clara to escape the scene with him, but she refused. Magnus could only leave by himself. However, before he left, Clara left behind a button from Magnus' clothing. This way, she could use tracking magic to find Magnus' whereabouts. However, when they found Magnus again, the situation was quite dire. The Circle had arrived first. Both sides were now engaged in battle. Many sorcerers were brutally killed as a result. Although Magnus, with his formidable strength, could hold his own against multiple opponents, there were simply too many of them. It felt like they would never stop coming. The opponents were also quite strong, which made it even harder for him to protect the other sorcerers. Fortunately, at this moment, Clara and the others arrived just in time. Eric shot an arrow that pierced the leg of a Circle member. Magnus immediately seized the opportunity and unleashed magical energy, killing the enemy with a single strike. Without this guy's interference, the ordinary members of the Circle were just a scattered bunch, easily dealt with by the group. Although they had temporarily achieved victory, this place was no longer safe. Magnus had to relocate to a safer hiding spot. As magical energy erupted around him, Clara and the others suddenly vanished from their location. When they reappeared, it was in another place. This power made Clara feel deeply curious. Then, Magnus instructed everyone to hold on to 2 companions each, forming a circle with 5 people. He warned them not to let go of each other's hands. Only then did he begin to chant a mysterious spell. A thick smoke erupted from the ground. A demon appeared in the room. Magnus recognized the demon as Valak, a major demon from hell. This also meant that the cost would be even more severe. Everyone froze in place, but Valak didn't care about their feelings. A black storm began to reveal everyone's memories, but it unexpectedly exposed their secrets. Issa had always had feelings for Eric, but Eric liked Jess. Seeing his inner thoughts exposed, Eric immediately wanted to interrupt the ritual. After he let go of his hand, Valak not only didn't dissipate, but became uncontrollable. Jess was sucked into the storm. Everyone rushed to pull him back halfway, but they couldn't hold on for long. Magnus exerted all his strength in an attempt to regain control of Valak, but it was of little use. Seeing this situation, Clara drew her light sword, ready to kill Valak.
If you kill the demon, your memories will be lost forever!
But Clara was determined. Thus Clara sacrificed her memories to save Jess. The clues to the Holy Grail were completely severed as a result. Soon after, Clara was training at the base. After all these events, she felt a deep inadequacy in her own strength. At this moment, a woman walked in. She was a high-ranking member of the Shadowhunters organization, and she was also Jess's mother. She came this time to issue a mission, but more importantly, to warn Clara. Because of her previous actions, she had repeatedly violated the rules of the Shadowhunters. She hoped that Clara can restrain herself. Then, the woman began to explain the upcoming mission. Recently, the elves had suddenly cut ties with the Shadowhunters. The higher-ups believed something must have happened. Therefore, they dispatched a team to investigate. This task fell to Issa and Jess. After all, the Elven King was her ex-boyfriend. Eric and Clara remained at the base to train. After Jess and Issa set off, Clara suddenly remembered that her mother had a very important box that only she and her mother knew about. Perhaps the Holy Grail was inside. So Clara took the opportunity to leave the Shadowhunters base, while Jess and the others were away. After Eric learned of this, he immediately sent a text to Jess. At this time, Jess and Issa had just met the Elven King. They learned that the reason the elves had cut off contact with the outside world was indeed due to unforeseen events. All of their scouts in the outside world had died under mysterious circumstances. As a result, the elves had entered a state of alert, completely severing all ties with the outside. Although Jess wanted to say it was Paladin's doing, he couldn't rule out the possibility of other forces trying to complicate the situation. Just as Jess didn't know how to explain, he received a text from Eric. He learned that Clara had left without permission. Jess felt a wave of anxiety wash over him again. He hurriedly bid farewell to the Elven King and rushed towards Clara's home. On the other side, Clara sought out her friend Simon to search for the box. However, the contents of the box greatly disappointed Clara. It was just a few ordinary souvenirs, with no magical energy at all. Just as Clara was puzzled, suddenly, Eric's voice came from outside. Just a moment ago, Eric had noticed a shadow passing outside the house. He was worried it might be members of the circle, so he told Clara not to go out. Eric had planned to shoot the shadow with an arrow, but the figure was simply too fast. However, in the end, Eric discovered that the shadow was actually a wolf. That guy was actually a werewolf. Not long ago, the werewolf leader had also heard about Clara's situation. His thoughts were similar to those of the vampire leader. The Holy Grail must not fall into Paladin's hands, so he mobilized all the werewolves in the stronghold to collectively search for Clara's whereabouts. Thus, the werewolves showed up here. As Eric was about to chase after it, he realized that Clara and Simon had been kidnapped. Soon after, Clara and the others were taken to the werewolves' stronghold. It looked like just a tavern. The werewolves only cared about Clara and didn't pay attention to Simon. They casually hung him up in a room. However, after consuming the vampire's blood, Simon had undergone dramatic changes. With a little strength, he broke free from the metal handcuffs, but he was well aware that his strength was insufficient to deal with those werewolves, so he called Jess and the others for help. To buy some time, Simon used fire to trigger the tavern's fire alarm system. When the werewolves saw this, they knew someone was causing trouble, so they first locked up Clara and planned to interrogate her after dealing with the troublemaker. Just then, someone appeared in front of Clara. It was Officer Luke. He urged Clara to come with him. However, Clara didn't trust him.
Don't come any closer! You want the mortal cup, just like everyone else.
Luke explained that he was protecting Clara, but the misunderstanding had not been cleared up. Luke was left with no choice but to carry Clara away. But when Jess and the others arrived and saw Luke carrying Clara, they thought he was the enemy, so they attacked and knocked Luke down. The next second, many werewolves emerged. Jess and the other team members immediately prepared for battle. Suddenly, there was a commotion among the wolves. A black wolf attacked the werewolf leader. In the end, the werewolf leader was killed by the black wolf. The surrounding werewolves immediately bowed to the black wolf. It had become the new Wolf King. The black wolf transformed into a human form, and it turned out to be Luke. As the current Wolf King, Luke ordered the werewolves to let Jess and the others go. However, the next moment, he fainted as well. Jess and the others immediately took Luke to Magnus, requesting the wizard to help save him. Magnus found the situation to be quite tricky. Based on his assessment, the reason Luke was unconscious was due to injuries from the fight. But more importantly, he was poisoned. Fortunately, he had seen related materials before. They just needed Jess and the others to gather the corresponding materials to brew a potion to try to detoxify him. They needed to leave one person behind to use their abilities to suppress the toxins in Luke's body and delay their outbreak. Thus, Eric was left with Magnus. After Magnus put in considerable effort, he temporarily stabilized Luke's condition. Just then, Luke regained a bit of consciousness. Upon seeing Magnus, the first thing he mentioned wasn't gratitude, but rather to tell Clara everything about the past. After saying that, he fainted again. So Magnus also told Clara the secrets he had buried deep in his heart. In addition to Clara already knowing that her mother Jocelyn was a member of the Circle, Magnus also detailed how he met Paladin. At that time, Paladin was still a rising star among the Shadowhunters, with limitless potential. Paladin took this opportunity to recruit many followers. However, 2.5 years later, he has completely fallen into ambition. Paladin believed that only pure bloodlines could maintain the excellence of the Shadowhunters' legacy. Therefore, he massacred a large number of companions with mixed bloodlines. In addition, those he deemed inferior were also slaughtered. At that time, the entire world was shrouded in a bloody storm. As the battles dragged on, Paladin's followers began to dwindle. Thus, he turned his attention to the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail couldn't only control demons, but could also artificially create Shadowhunters. As long as he possessed this artifact, Paladin would have an endless supply of followers. So he stormed into the Shadow Council to steal the Holy Grail. At this critical moment, Luke and Jocelyn appeared in front of Paladin to preserve the Holy Grail. To prevent him from seizing it again, Jocelyn took the Holy Grail and went into hiding. Not long ago, she was discovered by members of the Circle. After learning the details, Clara's determination to defeat Paladin grew even stronger. Just then, Jess returned with the medicine. Magnus poured it into the base he had prepared. Soon, a potion was made. At this point, Luke was barely hanging on. They had no other choice. As the potion was poured into Luke's mouth, the toxins in his body quickly dissipated. Before long, he woke up. Upon learning that Magnus had already told Clara most of the past events, Luke only added a few remarks. At first, he and Paladin were a perfectly compatible pair, but then everything changed. They both fell in love with Jocelyn. Trust between them began to fracture. Paladin then sought greater power. Luke often saw that he would use the blood of other races to enhance himself. At that time, Luke thought Paladin was just a bit obsessed with power, and that it wouldn't be a big problem. Until one mission later, Paladin deliberately trapped Luke among the werewolves, intending to eliminate him. At this moment, Luke realized that his friend had completely gone down the wrong path. He fought desperately against the werewolves, and was thus infected with wolf venom, gaining the ability to become a werewolf. When he saw Paladin again, it was already the night of the Holy Grail War. Hearing Luke's account, Clara eagerly asked him if he knew the hiding place of the Holy Grail. Luke replied that Jocelyn would definitely hide it in a place only Clara could find. However, this made Clara even more confused. In her memories, the only treasure her mother had was that box. After seeing the box Clara mentioned, he immediately recognized its identity. It belonged to Clara's brother. Unfortunately, he had perished in a fire long ago, perhaps out of longing for her son. Jocelyn had treasured the box all this time. Although the news was heavy for Clara, the whereabouts of the Holy Grail remained uncertain. Just as Clara was feeling anxious, she accidentally pressed the box. The box was strangely imprinted onto a piece of paper. Seeing this bizarre scene, Luke suddenly understood where the Holy Grail was. Jocelyn had once given him a set of cards, and the Holy Grail card looked exactly like the Holy Grail. It was very likely that it used Clara's ability to seal it within. Thinking of this, Luke immediately got up and headed for the police station. Jess and the others considered his safety and followed Luke to the police station together. Before long, the group arrived at their destination. To avoid causing trouble, Jess and the others didn't enter together. After all, it was difficult to determine if there were still members of the Circle inside the police station. However, what they didn't expect was that Luke was controlled shortly after he entered. Although those people looked like ordinary individuals, considering the critical moment of searching for the Holy Grail now, Jess and the others didn't think much, and immediately prepared to enter the police station. The four of them had clear roles. Jess and Clara entered the elevator to hide first, while Eric and the other two created chaos by cutting the power. The plan went very smoothly. Soon, Eric obtained a pass from a female officer. Then, Isa entered the distribution room and caused the entire building to lose power instantly. Jess and the others arrived at Luke's storage location. After a thorough search, they indeed found the Holy Grail card in a box. However, Clara was temporarily unable to retrieve it, so the group decided to retreat for now. At this moment, an anomaly occurred. There were indeed members of the Circle in the police station. They also brought a batch of scorpion-tailed monsters, nicknamed Demon Hounds. They were best at tracking. Seeing that the Circle had the upper hand, Jess and the others naturally wouldn't confront them head-on. The group immediately took off running. However, their large group made them an obvious target. Before they had run far, a scorpion-tailed monster was already on their tail. Although the four of them easily dealt with the monster with their strong strength, they faced many more pursuers behind. They had to think of a way to shake them off, so they decided to split up. Clara, carrying the Holy Grail card, was the top priority. She needed to return to the base quickly. The remaining Jess and others would flee in different directions to distract the pursuers. It was a good idea, but reality often doesn't go according to plan. Clara hurriedly fled, only to accidentally end up in a dead end. Behind her were the approaching scorpion-tailed monsters. If nothing unexpected happened, she would soon be devoured by those monsters. But at this moment, Clara suddenly remembered the Holy Grail card she had obtained. Jess and the others had said that the Holy Grail had the ability to control demons. Now this became Clara's only lifeline. She focused intently on the card, trying to activate her abilities on it. The card actually began to change. However, at this moment, Clara didn't know how to control demons. She could only scold them simply. However, the scorpion-tailed monsters seemed unfazed. They continued to advance towards Clara with claws bared. She issued a second command. Finally, the scorpion-tailed monsters stopped in their tracks. Ultimately, they turned and left. Clara planned to return to find Jess and the others, but she found that the area was already empty. There wasn't a single soul in sight. Just as Clara was puzzled, Jess suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Before Clara could speak, he began demanding the Holy Grail. Clara sensed that there was something wrong with Jess, but she didn't raise any alarm. Instead, she pretended to comply. When he was off guard, she attacked him with her lightsaber. The lightsaber pierced Jess's chest. It revealed that the monster's true form turned to ashes from the lightsaber. Before Clara could relax, two more people appeared. They looked like Luke and Eric. However, after everything that had happened, Clara naturally wouldn't easily trust them. Fortunately, Luke had some secrets that could prove his identity. This reassured Clara to believe them. Thus, the group returned to the Shadowhunter base together. This trip to the police station was quite fruitful. Not only did it allow Clara to master her abilities, but they also found the key item, the Holy Grail. However, after other forces learned the news, they began to have some ulterior motives. For example, the female vampire who had originally kidnapped Simon. After undergoing some modifications during this time, Simon had undergone dramatic changes. He began to experience some issues, constantly craving various types of blood, and even experiencing hallucinations at times. Everything around him was replaced by blood. This troubled him greatly, and he believed it was the doing of that female vampire. So he took the initiative to confront her for answers. This played right into the hands of the female vampire, transforming him into a half-human, half-vampire form. If Clara knew that her companion was in crisis, she would surely walk right into the trap. However, the development of things didn't go as expected by the female vampire. It was discovered by the vampire leader. He was reluctant to provoke the Shadowhunters further. He even voluntarily sent Simon's body to the Shadowhunter base. While Clara and the others were training, they suddenly heard an intruder alert, and immediately went on high alert. However, upon recognizing the intruder, and seeing Simon in his arms, the group quickly arranged a room for the two. They asked what had happened. The vampire leader hesitated for a moment, but eventually revealed some information. It was the female vampire who targeted Simon, intending to seize the Holy Grail. The four of them were instantly furious. Fortunately, the vampire leader hurriedly intervened, which prevented them from directly attacking the vampire stronghold. Moreover, the four of them had another matter to deal with, which is Simon's departure or stay. Now he was a half-vampire. If a ritual were performed on him, he would be completely transformed into a vampire, and then he would live in the shadows for eternity. But if he were to be buried, his heart would have to be pierced with a wooden stake first. Otherwise, in this state, he would only feel endless hunger, and live in a state of being neither human nor monster. The decision was handed over to Clara. She knew all the drawbacks of becoming a vampire, but she didn't want to lose her friend. In the end, she decided to let Simon fully transform. That night, the vampire leader took the group to a graveyard. After selecting a suitable spot, they prepared to begin the burial. However, at this moment, the female vampire suddenly appeared. Clearly, she had not given up on the Holy Grail. She had gathered a large group of supporters to directly seize it from Clara and the others, but the female vampire didn't expect that the leader would appear here. With the suppression of his bloodline, the ordinary vampires instantly turned against her. The vampire leader sentenced her to permanent confinement. Simon successfully transformed as well, which established a friendship between the vampire leader and Clara. However, after learning that he had become a vampire, Simon found it difficult to accept.
I'm nothing more than a monster.
Simon, you.
Stay awake! Please, just stay awake.
Clara watched Simon escape the scene. Her heart ached as if it were being cut by knives, but there was nothing she could do. Now, with the power of the Holy Grail, Clara and the others planned to deal with Paladin. However, finding the location of the circle became a major challenge. Just then, Isa's Elf King boyfriend arrived. He offered Clara and the others an option. Within the elf realm, there was a portal that could traverse various locations at will. Clara had parts of the portal on her, which was the necklace Jocelyn had given her. Not long after, the group arrived at the portal. Before starting, the Elf King repeatedly cautioned about the dangers of the teleportation. This portal connected parallel dimensions for time travel, so after entering, they would replace their counterparts in the parallel universe. If they couldn't quickly find the only portal there, it would be gradually eroded by the parallel world, until it was completely assimilated. In that case, they would never be able to return. Upon hearing about the dangers, Clara didn't back down. She stepped straight into the portal. When Clara awoke again, she found herself in a parallel universe. Here, Clara was just an ordinary high school girl. The people she once knew appeared around her in various forms. For example, Jess and the others had become Clara's classmates. What surprised her the most was that, in this timeline, her mother and Paladin had not fallen out. They looked like a loving couple. Clara couldn't help but think, how wonderful it would be if this were true. And this feeling was the assimilation of her by the parallel universe. Fortunately, Clara didn't forget her mission, but where the only portal was located remained an important question. Clara remembered the wizard Magnus. In this universe, Magnus was an ordinary wizard. Originally, he had no intention of helping this suddenly appearing girl, but when she drew a demonic visage, Magnus was suddenly taken aback. Though he had never encountered it, there were indeed relevant records in books. Magnus realized the girl wasn't simple. When he learned she was looking for the only portal, Magnus immediately used his unique magic to quickly locate the target. It was a castle. Coincidentally, this was actually a property owned by Paladin. He was recently planning to hold a grand ball there. This was a godsend opportunity for Clara. After a bit of preparation, Clara set off for the castle. At the ball, the dazzling lights around her made Clara somewhat dazzled. Then Jess appeared, making her heart flutter. These events were gradually wearing down her will. If she couldn't awaken in time, she would surely be assimilated by the parallel universe. Fortunately, Magnus arrived just in time. He used magic to help Clara calm down. She hurried to search for the portal with Magnus. If they continued to delay, the danger would keep increasing. Meanwhile, due to the magical fluctuations of the portal, Jess, who was waiting outside the portal, could have easily solved this guy, but he was distracted because he was concerned about the portal, and this guy actually broke in. Worried about Clara, Jess ignored the Elf King's objections and rushed into the portal. When Jess found Clara, the monster had followed him as well. The two grabbed nearby objects and began to fight the monster. After dealing with this threat, they finally arrived at the portal's location. They used it to arrive at the circle's lair. However, upon careful inspection, they found there was no one around. It seemed the entire circle had gone out. Just as the two were puzzled, a nearby cabinet made some noise. They cautiously approached to check it out. It was a trapped man. Jess immediately recognized this person as his father, who had been dead for many years. He couldn't understand why he was there. The man found a corner and recounted his experiences over the past decade. Meanwhile, Clara searched for her mother's presence. Eventually, in the basement, she saw Jocelyn enveloped in energy. This was the power of the potion from Magnus. As she contemplated how to take her mother away, Jess and the other man rushed over in a panic, and behind them, there were a large number of monsters. Clara took out the Holy Grail and commanded the monsters to leave, but for some reason, no matter how Clara commanded, the monsters remained indifferent. Just at this critical moment, Jess's father expressed that he wanted to try. Clara handed the Holy Grail to him. The next moment, his expression changed. Paladin triumphantly declared victory. He commanded the monsters to tear Clara and the others apart. However, strangely, the monsters didn't respond either. Instead, they all left voluntarily. Just as Paladin was puzzled, Clara took out another Holy Grail from her backpack. It turned out that everything earlier was just a ploy to lure Paladin into revealing himself. Paladin didn't linger too long and opened a portal to make his escape, but Jess controlled him with his lightsaber. Seeing this situation, Paladin revealed a shocking secret. Jess and Clara are actually siblings. Upon hearing this news, Jess froze in place. Paladin seized the opportunity to escape immediately. Although this time, Clara successfully rescued her mother, Jess was left in a daze. He couldn't believe that the girl he loved was actually his sister. However, Clara seemed oblivious to his state. At this moment, she was fully focused on the mission to save her mother. Clara found Magnus and learned that this potion was actually prepared by him and a wizard named Noel. He had made the primary contribution to it. They had to find him to create the antidote. Fortunately, Magnus knew Noel's location. Thus, Clara and the others arrived at Noel's residence. However, they needed to go through some tests to see him. Noel had set up a protective barrier around the house, but Magnus knew the weaknesses inside, so he led Clara through easily. After passing through, the group was scattered. Clara was teleported to outside a castle. She guessed that this was Noel's residence. However, strangely, it was empty. There were no signs of life. Just as Clara was puzzled, she noticed a portrait of Noel on the wall. With the idea of trying, she activated her ability to pull the figure from the portrait. To her surprise, she actually pulled out a Noel. He recognized her as Jocelyn's daughter, and naturally guessed Clara's purpose for coming. However, regarding the creation of the antidote, Noel expressed great difficulty, because he had not actually created the antidote at that time, and the book for concocting the poison was lost as well. The only clue was a half bookmark that Noel still had. However, just as he went upstairs to get it, a demon attacked Noel. Noel was killed on the spot. The clues were nearly cut off. Magnus immediately opened a portal to send Clara and Jess away first. He stayed behind to hold them off. After returning to the base, Jess believed there must be a traitor inside. Otherwise, the circle wouldn't have been able to catch up so quickly. But he had no idea who it was at the moment. He planned to start with those who knew about Noel. The first suspect was Eric's fiancée. However, after several hours of questioning, no clues were obtained. It was highly unlikely to be her. Just then, Magnus returned to the base. During this time, he searched for many of Noel's belongings, and took those he deemed valuable. Among them was a half piece of cloth. Clara recognized it at a glance, as being almost identical to a bookmark she saw in the parallel world. It should be the half bookmark that Noel mentioned. Magnus immediately performed a magic tracking spell on it. Soon, he found the location of the other half. It turned out to be the female vampire from earlier. Now, she was imprisoned deep within the vampire lair. The group had to give up on investigating the traitor for now, and instead go after the female vampire. After they left, a mysterious man entered the collection room. He knocked out the guard Delia, and stole the Holy Grail. At this time, Jess and the others in the vampire lair were still unaware that the Holy Grail had been stolen. They wanted to communicate with the vampire leader to temporarily release the female vampire Camille, but he refused to help Clara and the others, citing clan rules. Clara had to find another way. She found Simon, who had become a vampire, and asked him to help smuggle her into the confinement room. Simon immediately agreed. Thus, Clara secretly infiltrated the confinement room and found the coffin that sealed Camille. As the seal was lifted, Camille awakened. However, just as they exited the confinement room, they were confronted head-on by the vampire leader and his men. He had already guessed that Clara would use this method. Although the vampire leader greatly admired Clara's bravery, but the clan's rules couldn't be broken. Therefore, the leader immediately ordered to capture Camille and Simon. Their plan was about to fail. Just then, the wall beside them collapsed with a roar. It was actually Issa. The blazing sunlight blocked the leader and his men, forcing them to watch as Camille and the others escaped. Not long after, Clara and the others arrived at a luxurious castle. This was Camille's territory. It served as a safe house. Clara expressed her request to the other party. Camille replied that there was no problem. However, they needed to sign a contract as a guarantee for the transaction between them. As Simon wrote down his name, Camille readily handed the book to Clara. When Clara placed the half bookmark on it, all the contents transformed into magical knowledge. This was the book Clara had been looking for. But at this moment, a strange phenomenon occurred. A portal appeared in the castle. Immediately after, Paladin and his group walked out, following closely behind was Jess. It turned out that not long before, Jess learned that the Holy Grail was missing, and took Eric back to the base to search for it. By reviewing the surveillance footage, they identified the prime suspect, who was the boxing coach Hodge. They were both very angry about this. The reason Hodge did this was simply to rid himself of the Circle's mark. This gave Paladin the opportunity to put the entire world in danger. Jess and the others had to quickly retrieve the Holy Grail. Soon, Luke also learned about the Holy Grail, and immediately gathered all his werewolves to search for it. At this time, Paladin was reveling in the joy of obtaining the Holy Grail. He was baptizing his numerous subordinates with a strengthening potion made from the blood of various races. As long as it was combined with the power of the Holy Grail, a perfect strength potion could be concocted, giving ordinary people the abilities of shadow hunters in an instant. This scene was coincidentally witnessed by Luke's subordinates. Thus, not long after, Jess and the others arrived at this place, but they were a step too late. The place was already empty. However, it wasn't without some gains. They encountered Hodge and immediately captured him. Jess was ready to kill this traitor on the spot, but he was stopped by Eric. Although Hodge was indeed guilty, he should be brought to justice through the legal system, but Jess was still unwilling to let it go. So he cut off one of Hodge's hands and brutally tortured him to force him to reveal the whereabouts of Paladin and the others. This led to the scenes in the castle. At this time, Clara naturally knew none of this. She thought Paladin was there to find the book. Seeing that he had many followers, she was about to hand it over to him. However, Paladin stated that he had no interest in the book.
I want you to wake up your mother. I know that you'll both join me eventually.
Then he threatened Jess with the lives of Simon and the others to leave with him. This turn of events left Clara completely stunned, but fortunately, the book was in hand, and she immediately returned to Magnus to have him brew a potion to awaken Jocelyn. The mother and daughter finally reunited. The film ends here. Shadowhunters Season 1 premiered in 2016. The series continues the movie's universe, filled with all sorts of bizarre races. However, the plot is somewhat mediocre, but the characters' looks make up for this. In addition, the love and hatred among the characters, and the tangled relationships, are portrayed in a melodramatic fashion. If you enjoy my channel, please click subscribe.